What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So we've got a week off from the UFC, so I felt like doing a topic video. And that topic is basically like, to what degree mindset and mental toughness and things like that play a role in like people being successful at the highest level. Because we've got different points of view on this, and as you probably guessed from the title, like I'm gonna use initially Chael Sonnen and Corey Sandhagen as examples, but really they represent like two broad schools of thought in this, and different kinds of people fall into different camps here. So Chael Sonnen has said many times that like fights ultimately come down to who wants it more. And he said that in different ways, and I think like one way he phrased it was, round one is about who's more athletic, round two is about who's better, and round three onward is about who wants it more. That makes a kind of sense, and that's definitely like a more romantic way to view fighting. It makes it sound like a Rocky movie. Because what happens in every Rocky film, he's up against someone who's better than him, more experienced than him, or someone who's bigger than him, more athletic than him. And, at first it's going badly, he's getting beaten up, but he digs deep, and he's able to work harder than them, he's able to want it more than them, he's willing to take more damage than them, and he ultimately wins. And that's exciting, and that's a lot, again, more romantic than, if Rocky was just some tactician that out-strategized everyone and won that way. Now, Corey Sandhagen has said, look, at this level, we all want it. We're all devoting our lives to this. We're all training full-time. We're all like top athletes. Like, it's not about who wants it more. It's about who prepares better. And what he means is, like, who develops their technique as a fighter the best and who game plans the best, whose strategies and tactics are best suited to their opponents. Like, that's what it's going to come down to. And there's a sense in which he's clearly correct in that those elements, like technique, strategy, game planning, those elements are so important. And you can't just write those off and say, like, I just want it more, and that's all it's going to take. However, there's definitely a camp of people, I think most fight analysts overwhelmingly side with Corey Sandhagen. And there's a reason for that, and that's, not to stereotype, but most fight analysts are nerds. Okay? Some of them aren't, some of them train, some of them have competed, but most of them are nerds. Most of them are unfit people who either have never trained or have only trained a little bit. And their personalities and preferences are those of nerds. They're the kinds of people who play chess, who play video games, who, read comic books and high fantasy and would play tabletop strategy games and shit like that. And I'm not even really judging because I'm into some of that stuff too, but like, they're those kinds of people, and they like to analyze fighting as if it's a chess match, as if athleticism and willpower are only minor variables, and it overwhelmingly comes down to who's more technical and who prepares better, who's more strategic, because that's how they would like it to be. And I also get that it makes their job easier because it's hard to do good analysis of intangibles, and things like willpower and athleticism are pretty much an intangible. The things like, who's tougher and who's going to fight harder and who's like vaguely more, has better proprioception and stuff like that. Like, those are intangible things. It's a lot easier to just break down, this guy does this kind of technique, this guy has this kind of defense, et cetera, et cetera. They'll match up like this, treat it like an equation. That's more conducive to writing an article or doing a podcast where you're doing MMA analysis. However, I think there's a lot of truth as well to what Chael claims. I think there's a lot of truth as well to the role in which like mindset plays, the role in which being willing to dig deep when it counts and stay dialed in, stay locked in, even when it's getting rough. That's hard to like overstate the value of. And I think it manifests in ways people don't quite understand most of the time. Because mental toughness plays a big role, like, not just in the fight, but also in your training. And you could say that, like, who wants it more? Like, that question, like, it comes down to who wants it more. That's more of, like, a training question, because that's more of, like, a who trains harder, who puts more time in, more road work in, more sparring rounds in, whatever. That's, like, a who wants it more thing. But who actually wins the fight is going to be more of a strategy and game plan thing. That's how I think Corey Sandhagen would look at it. But I think that's underappreciating certain things. And also there just needs to be more discussion about what that actually means, because the mindset element like can still hold you back even if you're like putting all the work in. And so what I mean by that is you can be a full-time athlete and you can have a fight camp and you can sit down with your coaches and they can lay out the structure. They can say, this week is going to look like this. They'll break it down by blocks and they'll say, these days and these days you're doing your jiu-jitsu, these days you're doing your wrestling, these days you're doing your sparring, these days are strength and conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. This is how we're going to peak the strength and conditioning, on and on and on. This is how your weight cut's going to go. And they can lay that all out and you can follow it to the letter. You can show up for all the workouts, not miss a day. You can do the sets and reps. You can do all the sparring rounds, et cetera. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're bringing everything you can in terms of like willpower and drive, because people who train know that this happens all the time. So like imagine you're an MMA fighter and you're midway through your camp and it's the day that you're doing jiu-jitsu and you've got 6 rounds of grappling, you've got 6-minute rounds or something like that. And let's say it's round 3 and there's 10 seconds left and you're stuck in the bottom amount. And your coach is not watching because you can see he's over there doing something. And you've only got 10 seconds left and you've got 3 rounds to go after that. And you're already tired. There's a good chance for a lot of people that you'll sort of just concede. You'll sort of just ride the round out, not get submitted, but not really try to escape and just let the 10 seconds go and then go off to the next round. Whereas if your coach was there to yell at you, there's a chance you would actually put the effort in to try to explode out of there and actually try to be like, oh shit, I got to do, I got to bridge and I got to hook the leg. I got to get back to half guard. I got to get the underhook. I got base out, and I got to get back to my feet. And I got to do that in 10 seconds. And if you're the kind of person that just does that all the time, if you're the kind of person that does that even when your coach isn't there to hassle you, that is going to benefit you. And sure, that can go a little far in the other direction. Maybe you're someone who overtrains because of that. Maybe you need to be kind of reined in a little. But in any case, having the ability to tap into that is very valuable. And it's not just in the martial arts side of things, even in just the strength and conditioning side. Like, imagine you're bench pressing. You're a fighter and you're doing a strength day and the bench press is part of your workout. And let's say you're going to failure. And again, anyone who's trained, I think, kind of knows what I'm talking about here, but I'll demonstrate. Like, pretend I'm bench pressing and I'm going to failure. Just look at the differences between these 2 versions of failure. Version 1. Boom, failure. Now, version 2. Failure. That second one, I clearly was straining much harder. I was clearly putting everything in. I was treating it like gun to my head. I've got to get another rep. And I just still couldn't do it. Like, those are not the same thing. And anyone who trains knows you don't always get the second version. No matter how tough you are, no matter how hard you're trying, you don't show up every day just dialed up to 11. You'd like to, but you don't. And I'll give you I'll give you a personal anecdote. So like a month ago at my jiu-jitsu gym, a bunch of guys from the school were training because they were going to fly down to Vegas and compete in the IBJJF tournament down there. I did not go, but everyone was training for it. And so all of the sparring rounds for the last 2 weeks leading up to that were very intense. Everyone was treating it more like a war and less just like a technical session. And I'm totally fine with that. And I don't mind helping the guys prepare. And so I was going with one of the main guys I roll with, and it was intense. We were several rounds deep in the session, and it was mostly like a sparring day. And I was fucking exhausted. I was definitely hitting levels of exhaustion I don't normally hit when I train. And I was just determined to do anything I could to win that match. And there was a moment I distinctly remember where I can't like I don't even remember like kind of what happened. Like if I subbed him and we were resetting, or if I escaped a position and we were resetting or something. But we had this like break where he stepped away, and I was looking at him and getting back to my feet, and I was literally like just like staring at him, mouth hanging, just like breathing like that, and. Like in my head, I was just like, I don't care if I like pass out from heat exhaustion. Like I will do whatever it takes in this sparring match. And that's personally, I like almost never hit that level of determination in training. I have competed before. I almost never hit that level of determination when I've competed. You know what I mean? And I think for competitors at the elite level, their ability to tap into that, their ability to do that consistently, both in the training room and in competition, that makes a difference, you know? Because again, like, circle back to the example of like, oh, you're 3 rounds in, you got 10 seconds left, do you escape mount or not? Like, the more you give up in those situations, or the more you like just coast, the more you don't try to win, the more you're ingraining that habit, the more you're ingraining that mindset. Whereas if you're just constantly trying, if you're constantly giving it your all, you're ingraining the opposite mindset. And again, it just matters. Like that, we can think of certain fighters we've seen quit when it gets hard. And maybe quit is a strong word, but we've just seen them take their foot off the gas a little. We've seen them not try as hard as possible. And you can just see they're not at that level. They're not trying to empty the gas tank. You know what I mean? So like, not to throw shade at him, but like, because everyone's kicking him while he's down, but like Leon Edwards, when the going gets hard for him, he just doesn't seem to pull out all the stops. And compare that to like the end of the fight between Robbie Lawler and Carlos Condit, where they're wailing on each other. The bell dings, and they both literally just like fall towards the fence with their arms up on it, and are just like, like that. Like, those guys were willing to just put it all out there to win. And that's hard to tap into. Even those guys in other fights they've had didn't like put that level of effort in. You know what I mean? Lawler, got famous for being 5th round Lawler, but again, even the other times he did that, he didn't get that tired. He didn't put that much into it. And and someone like TJ Dillashaw or Alexander Volkanovski, like those guys stand out in my head as like great examples of people who were really good at tapping into that, just totally locked in, totally willing to take risks, totally willing to get exhausted, willing to get hurt, just doing what it takes to win. And again, that is a mental thing. That is a who wants it more kind of thing. That is not purely who's more technical, who game plan better. Because, again, Leon Edwards, extremely technical fighter, and not a bad game planner. I mean, he's got certain deficiencies, obviously. He's got weaknesses that people are exploiting. But his deficiencies are not purely technical. They're not purely matchup dependent. Like, they're largely matchup dependent. I think, you could take Leon and match him up with some very good fighters, and he'd look a lot better than he looked against Bilal and Sean Brady, because they brought very similar approaches that were kind of poisonous for him. But we've also seen other people take on poisonous matchups and bring more grit to the table. And, it makes me think of the movie First Man, which I rewatched the other day. It is about the Apollo 11, flight to the moon. It's got Ryan Gosling as Neil Armstrong. It's an exceptional movie. You guys should go watch it. But spoiler alert, they land on the moon. And the scene where they land, it's Buzz and Neil Armstrong in the lunar module, and shit's going wrong. Like, their radar isn't working, so they've got to land manually or something like that. And there's also a point of no return amount of fuel that they can't use up more than, otherwise they're going to be stranded. And they're approaching the limit for that. And everything about this is looking pretty fucking dicey. And even Buzz Aldrin's kind of looking at Neil, who's piloting, and he's kind of not sure they should proceed. But Neil Armstrong is so fucking dialed in, and that's, Ryan Gosling as Armstrong is so fucking dialed in that scene. You can tell that in his mind, he has told himself, I'm landing on the moon if it kills me. I don't care. Nothing else exists except landing this fucking module on this fucking surface, and I'm going to get this done. And it's the most again, it's a great performance. It's just like the most locked in you'll ever see a person be. And again, like being able to do that consistently is a skill. It is a talent. And not everyone has that. And if you don't have that, it might not matter how athletic you are. It might not matter how technical you are, how well you prepare. That might like put a ceiling on how good you can be. It might put a ceiling on your prospects of becoming a champion, of becoming the greatest fighter in the world. Because again, I think of people like Dillashaw, like Volkanovski, like George St. Pierre. Like these guys weren't just technical. They didn't just game plan well. They're such good competitors. They're so dialed in. And, think of GSP. Think of like when he fought Condit. Think about when he gets dropped by a head kick that comes out of fucking nowhere. And, excuse me, I'm still kind of sick. But he gets dropped by this head kick that comes out of fucking nowhere and goes on to win the rest of the round. He just gets his shit together and he does it. And this is a guy who famously had, anxiety about competition, who had a lot of security, kind of personal, insecurity issues growing up, got bullied, stuff like that, had a lot of personal demons, but he clearly had the ability to dial the fuck in. And that makes a difference. Again, it's not what the analyst nerds want it to be. It's not just a competition of, who's the better chess player, who's the grandmaster and who isn't. It doesn't just come down to that. It's not human chess. And that's the thing I hate too. Like I hate when people, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of all the combat sports is the easiest to compare to chess because it's very elaborate, very technical, the guard systems and everything and the gripping and all that kind of stuff gets so fucking complicated. And it creates these flow charts of games that people can develop. And since it's a bit slower, there's no striking, it's a little less like based around athleticism than other sports are, even other grappling sports like judo and wrestling. However, it's still not fucking chess because things like reaction time are still a factor. Things like speed and strength are still factors. Things like mental grit are still factors. And it's not like mental grit doesn't matter. In chess, things like chess are very mentally exhausting, don't get me wrong. But it's a different kind of grit. The grit it takes to stay focused in a chess game is not the same grit it takes to complete a marathon, right? And the physical element is different. And so, and if that's, gi jiu-jitsu, it's 5 times as true for MMA. This is not just a thinking man's sport. It's about how tough you are, how athletic you are. It's about how you perform. It's about how well you can lock in. It's about how well you can push as hard as you possibly can and reach that new ceiling. It's about how well you're able to say, this feels like as hard as I could possibly go, but can I find a new level? And that, to me, that's cool. Like that, as like many of us got into martial arts through like watching things like Dragon Ball Z growing up. And if you watch a lot of anime, they always make it like that. It's always about like just who wants it more, who can reach that deeper level and unlock this new potential inside themselves. And obviously it's not that easy. Like you can't just be like, well, I suck at boxing, but I'll just want it really hard and go train under a waterfall and then I'm going to go beat Crawford. Like that's not how it works. But like I've been saying, that side of it is still a very real component to elite level performance. And I think that's cool.